Hi there, this is my presentation. Um, so I'll just get it set up here. So I did the chapter on A Tale of Two Profiles by Roxane Gay. So first, as far as the summary, first I have the fear of unknown, which is the premise of the chapter. So the fear of not being able to know who could potentially harm you based on appearance is a lot of what this chapter is about. So someone who could seem harmless could potentially hurt us, but due to the fact that we judge based on looks, puts us either to assume that they're going to hurt us or they aren't. So it's very unpredictable. So for example, in the novel, we look at Johar Sinaira, who seemed like the boy next door, and he was identified as one of the two men involved in the Boston Marathon bombing. So this bombing took place on April 15th, killing 3 people and injuring over 300 people. Um, so this idea of him being someone that we would not allude to doing something like causing a bombing simply because of his appearance is what Gay is getting at throughout this chapter of the novel. So next about the summary, I have like glorifying tragedies. Simply because Zeranaya was an attractive man, so magazines turned the incident into a glorified thing instead of solely focusing on the fact that he did cause such a horrific incident. Instead, we as a society have ideas who looks dangerous and who doesn't, despite the fact appearances often do not play a role in one's motivation in life, is what Gay is trying to get at. So Gay also brings up the case of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. So for those of you who don't know, a little background knowledge about that. So this was a fatal shooting that took place in Miami, Florida. So Martin was only 17 years old when he was fatally shot by Zimmerman, who was a 28-year-old man. He was an insurance fraud investigator, not a police officer. But Martin was visiting his father and had stopped at a convenience store before heading back home. And he was seen wearing a hooded sweatshirt with his hood up. And Zimmerman stopped Martin due to his appearance and seeming suspicious because recently in that area there had been more robberies at the houses, and had called the non emergency hotline to let the police know that um, Martin seemed suspicious. And despite the fact that dispatch told Zimmerman to not follow Martin home, he continued to follow him. So when police did arrive on scene, Martin was found dead, and Zimmerman had cuts and a bloody nose as well. However, he was questioned and then later released because he stated it was self-defense and the police did not have any eyewitnesses. So this displays the kind of danger we as a society suspect. Simply because Martin was an African American male wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking alone at night, Zimmerman felt as though he had a suspicion that he was up to no good, despite the fact he had not seen him doing anything besides walking. Sonara is still described by his friends as a sweet and super chilled, despite his actions of committing a horrific crime. They continue to befriend Zanara because they are in disbelief that he could have committed such tragedies. Um, so again, due to the fact that he was simply featured on a Rolling Stones magazine, and that they made him appear to be such a good guy, many could not believe that he did do those things despite the fact that everyone did know. And this again is all simply due to appearances creating a facade to people. Uh, So Gay dives deeper into Sonara's appearance and how he notes that many commented how, and I quote, a beautiful tousled boy with gentle demeanor and soulful brown eyes, end quote. Despite him and his brother killing 3 and injuring many more, people still had this mentality because of his appearance that he had a gentle and soulful brown eyes and hair simply because of the way he looked. But in comparison, when looking at Trayvon Martin's case, these words were not used. Instead, it seemed to be just another killing. It was not glorified to this extent, except with the fact that people questioned if Martin was in the wrong to begin with, despite the fact he had already died on the scene. So another summary thing that took place in this chapter is normal lies. So what I mean by this is what we think is normal may not necessarily tell the truth of everything. So, for example, looking at Zara, he smoked weed, which seems like a normal thing a teenager would do, like to watch popular television shows, sports, music, girls. So he had interests in things that you and I could have. Um, but he put this facade on, this normalcy to people, when in reality he was suffering in silence, which a lot of his friends and family accounted for, is that they had no idea that he had this kind of violence trapped inside of him. So Gay also analyzes Reitman's article. So Janet Reitman created an article about Zarza and his how he put on this facade for people. She wants to understand what implored him to commit such a heinous crime. And she also discusses how his friends still wanted to be in contact with him despite the fact of knowing all of the things that he did. And Reitman uses this article to display empathy towards him. Uh, so many of his family and friends felt pity for him and the brothers as if it were a mission to feel a sense of belonging in their Islamic faith. So they were trying to create any sort of benefit of the doubt that they could give him to understand why he did these things. And they kind of created different scenarios to make him seem as though it was not as bad as it was. So even a professor from a community college comments that he's surprised that other young immigrants have not already done something like this, simply because of race and the issues that one may have when moving to America. So relating this back to Martin, no one wanted Sarza to get in trouble despite the many lives he negatively impacted. So many, again, felt bad for him simply because of his appearance and the way that his friends and family described his personality. So they continued to give him the benefit of the doubt. And Martin was murdered and recently, before he was shot, was suspended from school because of some drug residue in his backpack. And this was used against him as evidence in his case. Simply because of his race and appearance, media and people have a different perspective, despite him not inflicting any pain to anyone, but instead had his life taken, and Sarza killed 3 and injured many and is seen as a victim. So it kind of shows that comparison of two scenarios where there's an African American man who had drug residue, and this instead was used against him, although he had already passed from a fatal shooting, and someone who is not African American and is attractive to a lot of people is kind of given the benefit of the doubt simply because of his appearance. So I wanted to include this quote as I found it was very impactful. So, and I quote, "Only in America can a dead Black boy go on trial for his own murder," said Sarita McFadden. So this kind of shows again that it's another thing simply due to one's appearance that this case was solely based around, similar to Sars's case, because that Zimmerman only stopped Martin because of his race and his way that his persona gave off. Zimmerman went and followed him because of that. So we as a society unknowingly create a racial profile of those we encounter, and we let those assumptions drive us. So again, like I just recently mentioned, Zimmerman going after Martin simply because of the way that he had portrayed himself to Zimmerman, despite the fact Martin had no intentions of doing so that way. And also we racially profile Zarza as being someone who is quote unquote the boy next door, despite the fact he set off a bomb in a marathon to hurt as many people as he could. Okay, and then looking at effectiveness, first we have tone. So the tone of the excerpt, I would say, is discontented due to the way that Gay discusses the results of Martin's case in comparison with Zarza's. So, for example, when describing what Zarza had done, Gay uses the word terrible and relates his case to white privilege. So we can hear this in the tone of voice that she uses when describing these things, as she is unhappy with the way that Zarza's case has been handled in comparison to Martin's. So again, when talking about Zarza's case in comparison to Martin's, Gay notes that Rolling Stones did not give the same amount of effort for Martin as they did Zarza. So Trayvon Martin was only given around 12 words in the magazine, whereas Zarza got a front cover and a whole article page about him written in it. And again, they glorified all of the incident that happened in the Boston Marathon bombing. So thus showing that the public spent an exceeding amount of effort in defending Zarza's case and showed little empathy towards Martin, again, because of their appearance. And this relates to the part of differentiated between Martin and Zarza. So although they're very different, yet again, they are both seen as minorities, but it just displays the fact that African Americans are put into a separate subgroup and are still marginalized because of that. So next we have the text. So when Gay adds an excerpt from other people, such as the testimony from Wick Sloan, is written in an italicized font, which sticks out to the reader. So this is important how to the argument as how one may side with Zarza. So he describes how he isn't surprised that this hasn't happened before, as mentioned previously. So this kind of, again, gives the benefit of the doubt to Zarza and makes people feel empathy for him and feel sorry to the point that they are trying to understand why he did that. And the fact he says that I'm surprised someone hasn't already done that is kind of surprising. Next, we look at repetition. So Gay uses the word disproportionate 3 times within one paragraph to emphasize how different minorities are marginalized by whites. So again, reiterating the point that appearances, including race, are a determining factor for many things is seen here. And then lastly, we have the impact. So first we look at equal rights. This entire topic is impactful as we're living in an age where it is still a fight for equality in many different aspects, whether that is race, religion, sex, etc. So that is important when looking at that. And it's also important to remember looks can be deceiving, and it is easy to misjudge one's characters based solely on their appearances, which was done in both case scenarios of Zarza and Martin. And then it also puts into perspective how we as a society glorify horrific events such as the Boston Marathon bombing instead of focusing on the tragedies of the people that had passed or the ones that were injured during the event. We kind of put into question, why would someone who looks like this do this, and wondered, why did he do this, instead of, yes, he did this, and how do we move forward from it? And also from prosecuting him from the fullest. Instead, because of his appearance, we just were in disbelief that this could ever happen. So that is my, so thank you for watching.